Hey folks, welcome to the Rational Canadian podcast, hosted by Michael Shahadi. Hey everyone, thanks for joining the Rational Canadian podcast. Today I'm going to be covering a couple different topics, including active income generation, passive income generation, rental properties, the pros and cons with RRSPs and TFSAs. Let's move into the content now. Start with TaskRabbit. So for those who don't know, TaskRabbit is an online marketplace and platform that allows individuals to outsource small jobs and tasks to freelance labor. It's essentially the gig economy, but for everything under the sun. The platform connects users, known as task posters, with skilled individuals referred to as taskers, who can then assist you with various tasks, such as home repairs, cleaning, moving, delivery, handyman services, administrative work, and more. Users can browse available taskers, review their profiles, select the tasker based on their skills and ratings, and then negotiate the terms and pricing for their task they need to be done. TaskRabbit offers convenience and flexibility by allowing people to find help for tasks they either can't do themselves or don't have the time to complete. Now, one thing to note here is that depending on where you live, the rate at which the taskers get paid is different. That's also on top of the fact that you can kind of negotiate as you're scheduling the tasks with the task posters. And so this is one way that people can kind of, on their weekend, their free times, they take a week off work or whatever the case may be, they can leverage this application to then go and pursue additional sources of income and maybe even do things that they enjoy that they would have done, maybe for free. For example, I love landscaping. I would probably landscape for free, but it's a bonus if I can use an application to get me from, doing it for free for fun, but also generating additional income. So the platform handles all of the payment transactions and provides a level of security through background checks and reviews to ensure that a certain level of trust and reliability between the posters and the taskers. TaskRabbit operates in several major cities and regions. It's not that popular in Canada as of yet, but I have seen some tasks here being posted, a lot in the GTA and some here down in Southern Ontario as well. So it's definitely a good avenue for people who would just like to try it out. I think I saw that the average post here in South Ontario, hourly wages go from around 25, 30 bucks an hour all the way up to 60, 70, 80 bucks an hour. And the more of reputation you build and good ratings and comments, the more that you become the product in the sense, and people will come to you looking to get the work done because they see the reviews and the work ethic that you've provided. And so that's a great way to kind of build if you already have a great reputation, you already had a name to you, you could use something like TaskRabbit to kind of monopolize on that. The second application I wanted to cover is GoPeer. So GoPeer is it's still generating income, but it's a little bit more on the financial side. So GoPeer allows basically borrowers to go into the application. It's peer-to-peer, meaning it could be your neighbor or somebody else in the community who wants to have a loan. That loan could be for debt consolidation, it could be a car loan, maybe a down payment on a mortgage, or many different cases. As a borrower, they need to submit quite a bit of information, their employer, how much income they have, their living situation, whether it's renting or they own the home. And then after they build out that portfolio based on their credit score and all those other characteristics I mentioned, they then post that loan to GoPeer, and different people who might have some cash on hand can then contribute to that loan. For example, somebody might be looking for $10,000 to buy a vehicle and they don't want to go through a bank. They might go to GoPeer and then submit an application for that $10,000. And then based on their credit score and their income and basically their application, they will be assigned a rating anywhere from an A plus down to a D minus. And based on that, the interest rate also gets impacted. So of course, if he's an A plus credit applicant, then the rate might be, 6, 7%, something a bit low on the lower end for private lending. And that's just because GoPeer is basically saying that, this is a really, really great candidate for a loan. They're unlikely to default or miss out on payments. And so the rate that we're offering for this person is much lower. Whereas somebody who has poor credit might then apply and have a rating of D minus. And if that's the case, then their interest rate might be 20% or 25%. And so from the perspective of borrowers, I would suggest like not using that application if you have really bad credit score, because you're probably going to end up in a worse situation than you would if you hadn't used the application. Like you getting out of a 20, even 15% plus interest rate hole is really difficult. Now, for investors and lenders, it's a great opportunity to go in there. If you're somebody who's conservative with your cash, you can go and put money only on A plus credit applicants and earn that 7, 8%, 6%, depending on the applicant. Or if you're somebody who maybe is a little more aggressive and looking for some heavy growth on your capital side, you can then go to people who are a little more risky on that C, B, or even D lens. And then if you're earning quite a bit of interest, having a couple people default or miss payments might be offsetted if, let's say, you're hitting on 80% of your loans. So the strategy here would be, and GoPeer will also back this when you're on their site if you choose to use it, but they specifically say that you should minimize your risk by diversifying as much as possible. That means if you have $1,000, you're putting, $10, $50. Like I basically wouldn't go over $50 per loan distributed amongst multiple credit applicants. And this way you're reducing your risk and increasing your probability of getting paid back your capital and the interest in hand. This will then lead to, increased growth for you, and then you can also use the feature internal to GoPeer, which will allow you to auto reinvest those funds and then continue to generate income there. I will note that I think there's like a 2% roughly default rate, which again, if you look big picture and you're diversifying and only doing kind of like microtransactions, the 2% won't even, it is going to be negligible when you're earning, 8, 9, 10% interest across multiple loans. And the second part of it, it's usually, I think, 2 to 5 year loans, the length, the term, and you're locked in, right? So if you put $5,000 in on multiple 5-year A plus credit applicants, you're not getting that money back until the 5 years are up. I would assume that in the future, they're going to add a feature where you can then flip those credit applicants that you have loaned to. For example, 2 years into your 5-year loan, your applicant has not missed a single payment and you're earning 8% interest, and you can show historically that this applicant has been fantastic. You might then be able to flip that loan to somebody else for the last 3 years for a little bit more capital than you initially paid for it, but less than you would earn if you were there to the end of the credit cycle for that specific loan. But that doesn't exist as up to date. That's something that I'm assuming they're going to add in the future, which occurs all over in the regular financial markets. So that's another one. So we've gone over TaskRabbit. That was GoPeer. And the last one I wanted to touch on in here was Fulfillment by Amazon. So Fulfillment by Amazon, also known as FBA, is a service provided by Amazon that assists third-party sellers in storage, packaging, and shipping of their products. So sellers using FBA send their inventory to Amazon fulfillment centers where the products are stored. And when a customer places an order, Amazon essentially handles all the logistics, picking, packing, and shipping of this item to the customer on the behalf of the seller, right? So what's the catch here? Well, you're essentially putting out all of the capital and all of the risk, right? You're purchasing a bunch of some product. Let's say it's like a pen. You're buying 10,000 pens upfront with your cash, and Amazon is just letting you store it with them and fulfilling those orders as they come in. But if those orders never do come in, then you're going to be left hanging with all of these pens and no customers. And so it's a little bit more of a riskier bet, although it is something that people have used in the past to generate additional income. I would say that because of the way the culture that we have today, where people are just constantly changing what they like, fast fashion, fast everything, really, I would not use FBA, because today your pens are popular and tomorrow nobody wants to touch them. That's just like the culture, the market that we live in today. But it's another avenue that if you were trying to diversify and just do a little bit, generate a little additional income here and there with a little bit of capital deployment. Next, I'd like to cover a couple different passive income generation opportunities. So first, I want to talk about WealthSimple. WealthSimple is basically a virtual bank account that offers everything a normal bank offers, except there's no large-scale loans, at least not currently being offered. The other part of it is that they don't have any physical branches. So if you wanted to actually go in and talk with somebody, can't really do that currently. But why is it something that has kind of taken the market by storm? Well, first, it's CDIC insured, which basically means that the government will backstop it if the bank were to go bankrupt. That up to $300,000 is typically covered depending on where your cash is sitting, whether that's in investments or in cash savings accounts. But the big picture thing here is that if Wealthsimple ever were to go under, your funds would be returned to you by the government. The other couple things that they offer are extremely low rates for trading, for US purchases, and just all around anything that you're paying at your, big five bank here in Canada, whether that's RBC, TD, CIBC, BMO, or Scotia, you're going to be paying significantly less over at Wealthsimple. On top of that, they currently have a 4% savings account. It's 4% return from 0 to 100 grand, 4.5% from 100 grand to 500 grand, and 5%, 500 grand or more. And what that really means, to give you guys quick math, is if you were to put 100 grand in this account, you'd be earning $4,500 a year. And if you take that 4,500 and you divide it by 12, that would be your monthly return for the capital sitting in that account. Right. So if we were to do some quick math here and check what monthly return would we receive on $100,000, it would be 4,500 divided by 12. You're looking at $375 per month. And that's something that's, I know it's a huge amount of capital and it's not a great return, but to think that your capital is 100% secure and safe, and, also from a government standpoint, they're CDIC insured, you're basically just earning $375 for nothing. Now, that $375 is taxable income, or I should say the 4,500 yearly interest is taxable. And so you were going to have to pay your income tax bracket on those interests earned. So whatever, depending on your personal income, it may or may not make more sense to earn interest or capital expenses. Now, a guaranteed investment certificate is exactly like a savings account, except usually it comes with like a redeeming life cycle. So that means you put some amount of money, let's say $10,000 in a GIC that's going to earn you some return interest, let's say 3% or 4%. But the funds have to stay there for some period of time, whether that's 12 months, 24 months, etc. So that one, your capital is safe. It's going to be with a major institution that's offering that GIC. And so like there's no concerns on your capital per se. The returns are typically much lower than you would see like in like a peer-to-peer transaction or in like other banks, like for example, Wealthsimple. But it is an option that's there available. And they do have redeemable and non-redeemable options, meaning there are GICs that you can cash out early and some that you can't. Of course, if you're going to be able to cash out early, that's kind of like a feature of the GIC. You're going to get a lower return than if you're guaranteeing to the bank that you're going to commit long term to a GIC's life cycle. The next is RSPs and TFSAs. So RSP accounts are basically just an investing account where the amount of money that you place into that account gets removed from your yearly income prior to taxes. So an example would be if you earned $100,000 in a single year and you contributed $10,000 to your RSP, your tax, when you go to file for income tax, you're only going to basically declare that you earned $90,000 to the eyes of the CRA, because they're going to say he earned 100 grand, but he contributed 10,000 to his RSP, so $90,000 is what we're going to tax him on. And usually that's going to net you some return because during the entire year you were paying income tax as if you were in the $100,000 bracket, marginal tax bracket, whereas now you're actually at the $90,000 bracket. So the return isn't going to be something crazy. It'll probably be, maybe $1,000 or $2,000. But the good news is then that the money, the interest or capital gains that you create in this RRSP account are also untaxed. So if you put $10,000 in that RRSP and it's earning, let's say in some magical universe, it's earning 10% return year over year, that 10% you're getting is untaxed. And in the future, the scary part is when you withdraw those funds, you'll pay income tax on that, right? So if that number, let's say that 10,000 becomes a million over your lifetime and you start withdrawing it at the age of 60, you're going to have to withdraw it in really, really small chunks. Otherwise, if you pull it all out, they're going to tax you as if you earned all that money in that year. And basically, it negates all of the benefits that you've been kind of hoarding throughout investing in your RSP and not withdrawing those funds. So, to summarize here, the RSP is only beneficial if you earn a lot of income currently, meaning you're in a high marginal tax bracket. And two, when the time comes for those withdrawals to occur later in the future, your income will be very, very close to zero, or at zero is preferable. And you're going to be able to not withdraw all of it simultaneously. So you'll have the discipline to withdraw it in small incremental chunks to avoid paying the income tax that you would have ended up paying when you were younger if you hadn't contributed those funds. Now, I'd like to summarize that RSP topic by stating that, in my opinion, I think that capital, depending on your age, if you're going to start investing in your RSPs, I would personally wait until you're maybe into your 30s or 40s, because what you're able to do when you're younger is take larger risks and use that capital, although it's post-tax money. You can still use that capital and deploy it into different avenues of investment that come up. And the problem I see with contributing to your RSP when you're really young is as soon as those funds enter that account, one, the day that you choose to withdraw it, if it's prior to your income being less than the year in which you contributed it, you're going to end up paying the same, if not more, taxes on those funds. And the second part is, if you do withdraw those funds at any point in time, doesn't matter when it is, you lose that contribution room. So if at the age of 22 years old, let's say you put 10,000 bucks in there, you're really excited, and then, 5 years later, you decide, you know what, I want to buy a house and I want to be able to pull out some funds out of my RSP to do that. Well, that's fine, you can do it. You're going to pay income tax on it on top, which probably over those 5 years, your income has grown. So now the income tax you're paying on those funds that you're withdrawing is higher than it would have been when you were younger. And on top of that, you've lost that room to contribute moving forward. So it's kind of like a double whammy negative hit. And so you really, when you're going to contribute to an RSP, you really need to make sure that your income is at the highest it's going to be in your lifetime, hopefully. And the second thing is that you won't need to withdraw those funds until way later in your life. Otherwise, it will have a massive negative effect moving forward for you. So now let's move on to talking about TFSAs. So TFSAs are basically an RRSP, except the only difference is whatever you contribute to the TFSA does not reduce your taxable income. So in that same example I gave earlier, let's say you were earning 100 grand a year and you contributed $10,000 to your TFSA. Those $10,000 don't reduce your taxable income. So in the eyes of the CRA, you still earned $100,000 that year and you will be taxed based on that income. Now, one of the benefits that the TFSA has over the RSP, in my opinion, is the TFSA, the funds in that account, let's say it's $10,000 contributed and it becomes $100,000. When you withdraw the 100,000, that 100,000 is untaxed. It won't be taxed in any way, not in capital gains nor in income. Whereas in the RSP, what happens is when the gains are occurring in the RSP account, there's no taxes due. But as soon as those funds are withdrawn from the RSP, at that point, you're paying income tax on all of the funds that are being withdrawn. So from the perspective of tax, like reducing how much tax you're paying long term, the TFSA is actually a more powerful tool than the RSP, because the TFSA allows your income to grow infinitely in a sense with no tax burdens, whereas your RSP, although gives you initial tax incentives, grow and then cause you basically major pain in the future with huge tax burdens down the line. And so it's kind of like a give and take. Like, would you prefer a small amount of benefit today and basically no benefit in the future? Or would you prefer to take no benefit today and take large benefits in the future once you're able to liquidate that TFSA account? Yeah, and so my personal opinion is that the TFSA is a more powerful tool. I think that's the tool you should use when you're younger. You should hyper focus on contributing to the TFSA, make those like contribute, maximize that, and allow those funds to grow as quickly as possible. Because, of course, the longer that those funds exist in those accounts in some different investments like mutual funds and whatever else, the larger those funds will become in 20, 30, 40 years. And then the RSP, you could kind of wait to contribute to that until you're kind of a little bit older, let's say into your 30s or 40s when your income is a bit higher or at the peak, preferably. And then whatever funds that you were maybe going to contribute to the RSPs in your earlier ages, let's say you're in your 20s or early 30s and you've maximized your TFSA, you can try to look for alternative avenues to earn more money on your capital, whether that's like GoPeer or different like savings accounts, even rental opportunities or commercial or residential real estate opportunities. And then that kind of gives you more of a diversified portfolio as you grow older. Now, at this point, we've talked about different opportunities for active income generation here in Canada, passive income generation, RSPs, TFSAs. Now, I want to talk a little bit about rental properties. I think that this is something that everybody always talks about getting into, or at least knows somebody who's involved in investment properties. When you talk about rental properties, there's a couple key factors you need to remember. The first is that when interest rates are really, really low, prices will always be really, really high because a lot of people are going to go to the banks, they're going to get pre-approvals, and your approval amount is based on the current Bank of Canada rate or whatever rate the bank is offering, plus I think it's 2% that they stress test you on. So, for example, during 2020 and 2021, people were going and getting approvals based on a 4% interest rate or a 5% interest rate, which included that 2% stress rate, right? Whereas today, when you go and you're getting approved, it's 6% ish, depending on what bank you're at, plus 2%. So now you're getting approved at 8%, which is significantly reducing the ability for people to get approved for high amounts and creating less competition in higher brackets and kind of compressing everybody into the lower bracket purchasing. And here in Canada, I know for other places around the world, it's kind of crazy to hear, but lower bracket here in Canada is, between that 350, 400 to 650-ish. That's our lower, that's like the most competitive, something around 75% of housing that's being moved here in Southern Ontario is within that bracket. And so that's where the most competition is. Now, I would say that for investors to understand exactly what their numbers need to be is super important. When you're going to the table to purchase a property, you're never going to really know what the other bids are looking like. And so the only way that you can effectively go to that table and compete is going to be to understand your base CapEx and OpEx, and then being able to translate that into an offer or a purchase price if accepted. And so, like for OpEx, it's going to be your mortgage plus property insurance plus property tax, and maybe you're going to have utilities depending on if you want your tenants to pay for the utilities or not. But generally speaking, the baseline, no matter what, is going to be mortgage, property tax, and property insurance. Now, those three numbers combined will equal what you need to expect for rent. And so you can work backwards. And what I mean by that is you look at the market around, you use different applications like rental.ca, Facebook Marketplace, or different sources that are used in your area. And then you can kind of get a rough idea as to what type of rent you might be able to charge for your product in that region. Now, once you have that rental number, you can work your way backwards. You take that rent, you subtract your property tax monthly and your insurance monthly, and whatever is left can equal technically on a break-even scale to the expected mortgage payment. So now let's run a simple example so that we can see how this works in the real world. Let's say we have a property it's a 2-bed, 2-bath property, and we can expect rent to be $2,500 per month. The property tax are $6,000 per year, which is $500 per month, and the insurance for the property will cost you $100 a month. Now, what we would do is we take the 2,500 in rent that we are estimating through our different sources. We would subtract the monthly property tax, which in this case is $500. That leaves us with $2,000. We would then subtract the insurance, which is 100, which leaves us with 1900. Then we can go ahead and look at the current interest rates. What kind of mortgage would equal a $1,900 a month payment? And you can kind of work a little bit with the variables, whether it's a 25-year or a 30-year amortization, or you're doing a variable or a fixed, and then also the term, whether it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year, depending on what makes the most sense for you and gets you down to that number that you need. And we need to remember that there's 3 ways to benefit from having an investment property. The first is appreciation. So the property is worth 500 grand today. Every year, let's say we can estimate that there'll be some type of appreciation, probably around 4 or 5%. That's something that would be more conservative. And so that's one right there. Let's say it's 5%. That's $25,000 every single year in appreciation, meaning in the future, when you go to sell that property, now you're going to have some capital gains that you will get and then have to pay taxes on. The second way is cash flowing. That means that when you take your monthly rental income and you subtract your operating costs, there is some liquidity after, and that can be, a couple $100 depending on the situation, or greater than that if you have like a fourplex, duplex, etc. And then the last way to benefit is through the principal payments. So we need to remember that if we're earning, let's say, $2,000 a month in rent and our OPEX is also $2,000, there is an embedded benefit to us which exists within the mortgage payment, and that is equal to the principal amount of the mortgage payment. So anytime you pay your mortgage, let's say it's $1,000 a month, there's going to be some percentage in there that is towards the principal and some percentage that's in there that's towards the interest. And so you inevitably will be paying down and developing equity in the property, even if your month-to-month rent to OPEX is breaking even at $0. And so, in my opinion, one of the best ways to build wealth anywhere in the world really is going to be through investment properties, because you really have 3 different ways to earn the benefits. And at the end of the day, if you hold the asset for long periods of time, that being 10 plus years, there's always going to be up and down in the market, regardless of what asset you're holding, whether it's equities or bonds or real estate or cryptocurrency. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, there's always going to be ups and downs. And so the real thing here that you need to understand is if you purchase investment properties, the longer you hold it, the higher the probability becomes that you walk away with some benefit and some return. And so I'm not really for the idea of buying a property and flipping it. I think that it's a great way to earn quick money, but it's not really a solid way to develop a nice base. I think over the last few years, especially here in Canada, people have gotten used to, in a way, making easy money. They go and get a loan, they buy a house, they put a little bit of lipstick on it, and then they're walking away with 6 figures. And, that was a great avenue, I think, over the last few years. But I think that the time for that is going to kind of slow down now as rates stay high and eat away at the profitability. Not only is it much harder to get into the market because of interest rates, but also we haven't really seen that much of a reduction in purchasing price. So the consumer, or at least the investor, is getting hit from 2 sides, one being interest rates, the second being the price of commodities. So it's just getting harder for people to make money on flip. So thanks for sticking around. Just to kind of summarize, we covered different opportunities for wealth generation here in Canada. We covered TaskRabbit, GoPeer, FBA, which is Fulfillment by Amazon, WealthSimple, GICs, RSPs, and TFSAs. And then we ended the pod on rental properties and the different variables to look out for if you decide to go into renting as a landlord. So if you have any questions or concerns, or you guys want me to deep dive specifically in any one of these topics and go further and have more specific use cases, feel free to reach out to me through the pod, and looking forward to the next one. Thanks for listening. Until next time, TRC out.